Prescott. Bryant. Hit in stride. Bryant, touchdown. Prescott's going to take it. And make it tie game.
You know what? I think it's going to be tough for Dak this year because they lost Des Bryant. And
but winners worry about winning, and losers worry about winners.
Dak Prescott's numbers are getting ridiculous now. Every time I open my computer or my phone, I see another story about another stat I did not know.
He's getting all these yards because he put his team in a hole in the first half.
We are all heartbroken for Dak and this very disappointing injury. The outpouring of messages that I've received regarding his setback speaks volumes to the respect and admiration that he has earned from his teammates.
This morning on Get Up, they asked, is Dak Prescott the person that Patrick Mahomes should worry about for the MVP race next year?
Jerry was outside and said that Dak's going to need surgery. He can be out several weeks with the thumb injury. Can you just elaborate on that?
Well, even on that final play call, Broussard, he screwed it up as much as anybody.
Dak is ass, right? Can I say on TV? He is ass.
I like what the defense did. The offense just didn't show up.
Shut up! What did I tell you was going to happen? What did I tell you was going to happen?
It's only right I say it again.
Ass.
Should we be surprised by the Cowboys' early playoff exit considering history?
Did you say surprise?
Cowboys owner Jerry Jones says quarterback Dak Prescott will undergo season-ending surgery tomorrow for his torn hamstring.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is other things matter too when it comes to teams.
I'm not trying to say that doesn't matter with Dallas. I'm not trying to say that's not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not saying that.
You won't give Dak Prescott any leeway. You say it's all him. It's either all.
Well, if it ain't Dak Prescott, my oldest remaining QB debate, my nemesis as a Giants fan. And with all the attention the Eagles and Jalen Hurts have been getting, and Dak missing significant time 3 of the last 5 years, I think the media has forgotten about their favorite talking point. With the new era of QBs in full swing, Dak is now the longest tenured quarterback in the NFL, entering his 10th season with the Cowboys. That's more than Mahomes with 8, who didn't start until year 2. So there's no QB with more experience with their team than Dak Prescott. Yet somehow Dak remains one of, if not the most controversial QBs in the NFL. As if no one can agree on his evaluation or even what tier QB he is. And after 9 seasons, I believe there's got to be enough for us to understand at this point what the Cowboys have been for him, what he's gone up against, and how he's performed. No other QB has done it for longer with one team. So let's figure it out. Why is Dak Prescott the most controversial QB in the NFL? Is he the problem in Dallas? And how should he be ranked? Now first, I always think it's important to establish who a player is, where they come from, and what they overcame to get to the NFL. So back in 1993. Dak Prescott's story begins in a small town of Sulphur, Louisiana. Born on July 29th, he was the youngest of 3 boys raised by single mother Peggy Prescott. Dak's father was present in his life as well, inspiring his son as a college football player at Grambling State, but the parents had split. Life was not easy for the Prescotts. Peggy worked long hours at a truck stop to support them, instilling her children with values of resilience, discipline, and faith. What they lacked in resources, they made up for in heart. Dak's bond with his parents would become the foundation of his character and the core of his drive. In high school, at Houghton High in Louisiana, he quickly stood out, not just for his powerful arm and athleticism, but for his leadership as well. On the field, he was a dual-threat quarterback, commanding the offense with poise and grit. He led the Buccaneers to a district title as a senior, throwing for nearly 3,000 yards and rushing for over 900 more. But even then, he was overlooked by major programs. He didn't come from a powerhouse school, and scouts weren't convinced he had what it took to compete at the next level. Only a handful of schools showed interest. Mississippi State offered him a scholarship. Dak took it, determined to prove everyone wrong. College wasn't smooth sailing at first. Dak Prescott redshirted his freshman year and saw limited action in his second. But to make matters worse, in 2013, Peggy Prescott lost her battle with cancer. As a 20-year-old young man, it likely seemed that nothing was going right for Dak, and the world was against him. But with his future in his hands and facing a mountain of adversity, Dak made it his mission to make his mother proud. By his 3rd season, he was the starting quarterback, and Mississippi State was no longer just another SEC team. Under Dak's leadership in 2014, the Bulldogs surged to the top of the national rankings, reaching number 1 for the first time in school history. Prescott shattered records, career touchdowns, passing yards, total offense, and transformed the whole identity of the program. However, despite this, Dak still flew under the radar, and scouts were not blown away by his tape or his measurables. Teams doubted his footwork, mechanics, his ability to adapt, and he was a projected mid-round pick. But Dak had heard it all before. When the Dallas Cowboys selected him in the 4th round of the 2016 draft, 135th overall, as Romo's backup, it was not the end of the road. So that's Dak's journey to the NFL. Quite an inspiring one, and that should certainly be considered as we proceed, but what were the results once he actually got his opportunity to start? So we'll quickly break down each season and discuss the positives and negatives, and then dive deep into the main points of discussion surrounding Dak and try to figure out what led to such disagreement. So starting with 2016, in his rookie season, Dak was not supposed to start, but when Tony Romo went down in the preseason, Dak stepped in and stunned the league. He threw for 3,667 yards, 23 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions, leading Dallas to a 13-3 record and earning NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year honors. His poise, efficiency, and leadership immediately challenged the stereotype of a raw 4th-round quarterback. Though the Cowboys lost in the divisional round to Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay Packers, Dak's rookie year cemented him as the franchise's future. And then the next year, 2017, we had a bit of a sophomore slump. The expectations were sky high, but the year was defined by turbulence as Zeke faced a 6-game suspension to start things off. The offensive line battled injuries, and Dak's numbers regressed to 22 touchdowns and 13 interceptions and missing the playoffs. Critics now questioned his ceiling, without a dominant run game suggesting Dak was more of a game manager than a difference maker, and that the last year was a fluke and he landed in a fortunate situation. And this was the real first test of his resilience and ability to carry the team independently. He got another chance the following year in 2018. In 2018, it was a tale of two halves. They started 3-5 and Dak struggled with consistency, but after trading for wide receiver Amari Cooper, it changed everything. Dak found his rhythm and confidence in the offense. He finished with over 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns. Over that stretch with Amari Cooper, they went 7-1 and won the NFC East. They even made it to the playoffs and beat the Seahawks in the wild card round 24-22. Though they did follow that up with a loss to the Rams in the divisional round, a team that did go to the Super Bowl. Dak's ability to bounce back and elevate his play with better weapons marked a turning point in how he was perceived. Not quite elite yet, but definitely more than a placeholder. So the following year, statistically, was one of Dak's best. In 2019, he threw for a career-high 4,902 yards, 30 touchdowns, finishing second in the league in passing yards, but the Cowboys underachieved as a team, failing to make the playoffs with an 8-8 record. How does that happen? Jason Garrett's coaching came under fire, and some critics argued Dak's stats were inflated in garbage time. Still, his play showed clear progression in arm talent, aggressiveness, and command of the offense, especially, in clutch scenarios. He was really starting to show some positive intangibles. In 2020, Dak started it off on another historic pace, passing for over 1,800 yards in just 5 games. But in Week 5 against the Giants, disaster struck. He suffered a gruesome compound ankle fracture, ending his season. Following it up with this start to last year, the growth that you were seeing in the quarterback, this had to have been a massive disappointment to everyone in the fan base, as it was looking like Dak was putting together an MVP caliber season, potentially getting hot towards the second half of the year for the playoffs. So this was super disappointing to see, not just for a Cowboys fan, but for NFL fans in general. You just don't want to see stuff like this happen. And then in 2021, in March, Dallas committed to Dak, following up this injury with a 4-year, $160 million contract. Many questioned the price after such an injury, but Dak responded, showing it was worth it, having a strong comeback season of 4,449 yards, 37 touchdowns, and a 12-5 record. Clearly, the offense was electric, leading the NFL in total yards and in points scored. However, despite this, the Cowboys were one and done in the playoffs again. falling to the 49ers in a sloppy wildcard game. Despite the personal success, the postseason doubts lingered and the narratives of failure in the playoffs were beginning to stick at this point. Following that up in 2022, Dak missed 5 games early in the season with a thumb injury, but returned to lead the Cowboys to another 12-5 record. However, his play was a bit more erratic this year. He tied for the league lead in interceptions at 15, playing only 12 games. In the playoffs, he played a near perfect game against the Buccaneers, but definitely faltered against the 49ers in the divisional round, throwing 2 costly interceptions. Once again, Dak was good enough to win in the regular season, but not good enough to silence the playoff critics. And then in 2023, another MVP caliber season, throwing for 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, and just 9 interceptions. Dallas finished with another 12-5 record for the 3rd straight year and earned the number 2 seed in the NFC. Many saw him as an MVP candidate, but in the wild card round, they were stunned again. Who would have guessed? By the Green Bay Packers at home. Dak threw 2 interceptions in a blowout loss, reigniting all the questions. Can he win when it matters most? Is he a top-tier QB, or is he just good? And then in 2024, trying to respond, it was just a very odd year for the Cowboys. They had only CD as a true weapon. The line was beginning to regress and suffer injuries. The defense still had run defense issues. And after an underwhelming start to the season, Dak also suffered a hamstring injury that landed him on the IR, causing him to miss the rest of the season. The Cowboys did finish 7-10, though, surprisingly, but still fired the staff and decided to restart heading into 2025 with Brian Schottenheimer. And now we are here. So from a straightforward perspective, Dak is highly productive in the regular season and when healthy, and consistently got the Cowboys to the playoffs, but he can't get past the divisional round. I want to dive deeper. I want to really pinpoint exactly what the positives and negatives are here, and then talk about the playoffs. So let's begin with the negative takeaways. I want to start things off by talking about health, because it's starting to become a concern. The best ability is availability, and though it's not anyone's fault that he gets hurt, the Cowboys missed the playoffs 2 of the 3 years that he did get injured. And the year that he did come back and get them back to the playoffs, they still lost to the Niners pretty badly. It's definitely something you can take into next season, as well as rather than crafting your game, getting those live in-game reps, you have to spend months rehabbing and missing valuable, like I said, time reps, and health stability with each injury also goes down. It also seems like he's a bit more hesitant to use his legs now and maybe a little slower. I hope this is just the last we've seen of Dak's season-ending injuries, and we can hope to see a full finish to his career. Next is a pretty simple one, 2-5 in the playoffs. As I mentioned, one of those losses came from a year off the fractured thumb. He scored 12 points against the Niners, but lost in that game. But 3 of the other 4 losses in each opening drive, he did not score. The one drive that he did score was the Green Bay Packers game against Aaron Rodgers, where he started things off with a field goal. And then finally, this is extremely nitpicky, but I guess it's fair to say he doesn't have standout elite physical traits. His arm is the closest thing to it. It is great, but it's still limited compared to some other guys. Athletically, he's not bad, but that still puts him out of reach of the elite scramblers and guys with elite pocket feel. These sorts of things decrease your margin of error as a player. And of course, you would rather have more tools at your disposal. But I reiterate, this is very nitpicky and still plenty talented enough to get it done. Most do not have the athletic traits of Lamar, Mahomes, or Josh Allen, and you can pretty much make this argument about anyone that they could be physically, more gifted, more built in the lab, but it's just something I wanted to point out. And now for the positive takeaways. Here's some stats that might shock you if you have not heard them before. Dak is 7th all-time in completion percentage, 15th all-time in touchdown to interception ratio, and has a 98.7 career passer rating. You want to talk about winning? Well, career winning percentage is at .64, so 64% of the time in one-score games, he has a 60% winning percentage. He's got 23 game-winning drives. He's got 15 fourth-quarter comebacks. Since 2020, players with the most games of 3 touchdown passes or more, Dak is 3rd on that list with 20, behind Josh Allen, who has 21, and Patrick Mahomes, who has 23. So I think early in his career, it's fair to question if a guy is benefiting from a system, and like if that never changes, they're always playing in that system. But really, since the fall off of the run game in 2017, the Cowboys have become a passing team that leaned on Dak to carry the offense, and the stats here definitely show that. We've also seen since his sophomore slump, he steadily has improved as a player. Even though he has not surpassed the divisional round statistically, he's definitely been improving, and that's even through injuries. But if he's all this great, how hasn't he lucked into an NFC Championship appearance at the very least? I mean, is he to blame for all of these playoff struggles? All right, well, as I mentioned in the 12-point loss to the Niners, he was coming off of an injury that season, but the other 4 losses, they scored 31 points in the rookie year versus the Packers, 22 against the Rams team that went to the Super Bowl, 17 against that Niners team, and then 32 against the Packers. And it looks like he puts up an effort in those losses, but it seems there's a lot more than meets the eye on these playoff games. I mean, truly. One side will say Dak only is putting up these points in garbage time, and the other will say he's the only reason that they ever had a chance to win to begin with. And I believe the lack of agreement on Dak's evaluation all stems from how we sort the blame of these playoff losses and whether Dak truly had an opportunity to get it done. So let's dive into it, the playoff deep dive. People often joke about how Dak can never get past the divisional round, but he has versed great competition in all of his playoff games. I mean, the 2 worst teams he played, he beat the Seahawks and a dying Buccaneers team. But he also lost to, as I stated before, Aaron Rodgers in his very first playoff game, a Rams team that went to the Super Bowl, 2 Niners teams that were Super Bowl caliber, and a Packers team that was in the middle of breaking out and truly broke out against them. I mean, this one to me is the least excusable, but they definitely put up a fight against the Niners, this Packers team. So they were truly much better than we initially thought. Consistently failing to show up as a team as well in big spots is definitely more of a coaching problem. That's not on Dak, even though as a leader, he plays a part in it. It has way more to do with the coaching matchups and the mental preparation for the team that all goes so unnoticed, yet has one of the greatest effects on the game. When both teams are so good, those sorts of things make a huge difference. Coaches like Dan Quinn and Mike McCarthy are great in the regular season, but collapsing has always been part of their history. And people dish out a lot of hate on the Cowboys and to all facets as well. They'll forget that they're saying that Mike McCarthy, Dak, the defense, and the weapons all suck all at the same time. Clearly, that's not the case. They are consistently a playoff team. So what is the problem and what is actually helping them, right? Let's identify that. To me, what has consistently been there the most is the line. Although it's been years since they've compared to the offensive line he had the first year, I would say overall, outside of when there's some injuries, the starting offensive line for them has been good. And, everyone suffers some injuries to their offensive line here and there, and it always has a negative impact on the quarterback. Having at least one wide receiver one most of the time, with the exception of 1 to 2 seasons, although the depth is most of the time over the past few years, since CD and Amari, outside of that, I don't really think there's been great depth, but I would say he's always had a wide receiver one. And then people talk about the defense. A lot of people say it's great. I have always called it overrated, constructed in classic Dan Quinn fashion in the style of leaning into game script, meaning when the Cowboys are winning, they can predict that the opponent will pass and then tee off against that. And if you want to go even further, like Dan Quinn does, you gear your personnel towards defending the pass. It means your defensive linemen are better at getting sacks than they are at stopping the run. Your defensive backs are encouraged to try to force turnovers and potentially bite on double moves and things like that. And this can take over a game. I mean, if you're winning and the other team is just trying to get a drive going and you're teeing off on the pass and all of these short routes, it can really spill things in your favor. But if you're losing, that same personnel is weak against the run. And now the one thing you need to stop on defense to get back in that game, you cannot stop. Now the opponent is going to take over the game. I think 2021 was their best shot on offense especially, but that Niners team was just such a bad matchup. The 49ers rushed for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns and averaged 5.4 yards per play. They scored a touchdown right away. and put 10 points on the board in the first quarter. And you know they had the ball for most of that time. That's the worst possible start there is for this Cowboys team. And in the first 24 minutes that it took the Cowboys to score, the 49ers had the ball for 16 and a half minutes compared to the Cowboys' 7.5 minutes. That's 9 extra minutes that the 49ers had the ball. At a score of 13-7, the Cowboys offense was outpacing the 49ers, and they did start coming back. However, when your defense is built like that, it's like climbing uphill or swimming against the current. The script is in the favor of the opponent the whole game from the moment they scored first. And this can be underlined in each game. The Packers in 2023. This game was wild. 143 rushing yards, a ton of busted plays, and the Cowboys finished ahead on time of possession, mostly because that was the time they had it in garbage time. Compare that to the Cowboys running backs who had 67 rushing yards, so no run game, no setting up third downs. Before Dak's first interception, the Packers started it off with a 7-minute and 52-second touchdown drive. And after that pick, the defense allowed a touchdown that was in the red zone, okay, but Dak followed it up with a decent 5-minute drive, but they get stopped at the 42-yard line and line up to punt. Why? I will never understand why you would not try to kick a field goal there. And then they get penalized. So now you don't even have an option to change your mind and kick a field goal. That's terrible coaching. And then right after that, the defense allows a 93-yard 5-minute drive capped off by a 20-yard touchdown. Just a complete backbreaker. I mean, he threw a pick six, but show me the list of guys who perform well when the time of possession difference is 17 and a half minutes to 9, and the other team scored touchdowns on 3 of their 4 drives. Even with the pick, you want to call it 2.5 or whatever, Dak would have needed to have 2 long drives to make up for it in his response just to still be losing. The Packers scored 6 touchdowns on their first 7 drives, so it seems obvious that the defense clearly had no answers whatsoever. So what chance did Dak really have besides playing a perfect game? And you can extrapolate this whole theory from any game by basically just looking at time of possession. Of course, there's a ton of other stats that contribute to this theory, but typically they're all congruent with what you would expect if the time of possession's in favor of one team. These other stats are going to be in favor of that team as well. And if it's not, like if time of possession's in favor of the Cowboys, like in this case, it is because they had the ball for so long in the fourth quarter. So let's look at the Rams-Cowboys game. Rams had 36 minutes and 13 seconds to 23 minutes and 47 seconds. That's 12 and a half minutes. Zeke, 20 carries for 47 yards. No run game. The other matchup, San Fran against Dallas in 2023, 33 minutes to 27 minutes. That's an extra 6 minutes. 48 rushing yards from his backs compared to 94 for the Niners. Obviously, you see the difference there. And rookie year Dak had the run game, had the weapons, threw a pick, but Rodgers gave it right back and scored a touchdown or field goal on every other drive after that. Green Bay had 3 punts. Dallas had 2. Dallas did win time of possession, but I don't know how you can look at Dak getting a game-time field goal with 1:30 left, leaving 35 seconds left as a rookie, then watch that play with Jared Cook and Aaron Rodgers and say, yeah, I'm going to say that was on Dak. It's not that dramatic every game, but it happens drive to drive and play to play as well. This is, to me, the worst possible flaws that you could allow to exist on your team, especially when it comes to trying to win in the playoffs. Running the ball and stopping the run to gain an advantage in clock management is more critical than ever in the playoffs because you know you're versing some of the best competition and you might not want to give them the ball back, right? Because they could score in 30 seconds like Aaron Rodgers. And clearly, Dak has been missing both of those in all of except one playoff game. So with all this talk of the Cowboys personnel not being well constructed, where does that lead us? Management. So now that we've identified the source of these playoff losses outside of Dak's play, we can also determine the root cause of those issues. So if we're saying there's no run game for him, there's no run defense for him, why is that an issue? Whose fault is that? It's management's. And something I've realized over the past few years is a big counterpoint to Dak haters. One, like I used to be a huge Dak hater, while some will say he's been given great teams before and failed to succeed in the same situation are the same guys who will say Jerry Jones, who's like essentially the acting GM, is a terrible owner and the reason they will never win a Super Bowl. So let's ruffle some feathers and talk NFC East rival QB, Jalen Hurts. People will talk like they've been given this very same teams or the same opportunities. But with the way people talk about Howie Roseman and Jerry Jones, that's like having the best GM in the league versus the worst. I'm not saying that's exactly the case, but I would say Howie is the best right now. And Jerry's tendencies consistently waste money and miss opportunities for the Cowboys to max out their roster. So from a managerial perspective, Dak is not given the same chance to succeed as other QBs with great GMs like Lamar, Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, GMs who emphasize defenses and run games. At the same time, it's not like he hasn't had a few opportunities to show he can overcome this and pose a comeback or just make it close. I mean, even if the defense is completely selling, it is possible to dink and dunk in replacement of the run game and keep pace that way and control the clock that way. But the other team knows that you're trying to do that. And to do that, you also still need solid weapons outside of CD, and you also need a running back. So you would have to be like nearly perfect to get that done. And this, to me, is the main reason Dak is so controversial. No one seems to see his playoff losses the same. I think people are too quick to boil it down to QB versus QB in the playoffs, when roster, coaching, and injuries can shift the tide so out of favor of one of the guys. I don't think it's always applicable. There are situations where both teams are relatively comparable and the game can be used as an example when comparing QBs. But what about when it's not comparable? What do you do then? To me, you got to dig deeper and ask yourself if the guy had a chance to begin with, and if there even is a QB out there that could have won in that matchup. Some of you may say that's the exception for an elite QB, that a guy like Mahomes could do that. But we just saw an example in the Super Bowl that when outmatched by his roster, it doesn't matter who the QB on the other team is. You are going to lose. But what I want to point out also is how many great QBs have never won Super Bowls. And I want you to ask yourself, why haven't they won if it's on the QB? Dan Marino, top 5 guy all time. Jim Kelly back in the day made it 4 times in a row, lost all 4. Randall Cunningham, super talented. Steve McNair, a yard away. Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers, more recently, those guys all gave you a chance to win it all. But are we going to go down in history and say anyone who has won a Super Bowl is better than them? I don't think so. The team and organization failed, not just them. The same goes for success. It's no coincidence that Brady and Mahomes teams always had great offensive lines and defenses to control the clock, because if you can control that, an elite QB will maximize your chances with lesser weapons. And look at what happens when Mahomes' offensive line is injured, like versus the Bucs or the Eagles. It all falls apart. When Brady's offensive lines couldn't handle the Giants' pass rush, they lose. So to me, it seems in the playoffs, the Cowboys are holding Dak back, not the other way around. It's on the organization to win, to understand what they're working with and make the most of it. Now, how do I rank Dak Prescott? We've had all of this discourse to get us to this point, and this is really tough. And the overall list is subject to change before the beginning of the season, because we are at such an interesting time where all the QBs I grew up with are gone, and the vacant spots in the top 10 are up for grabs, and there's a lot of shuffling around year to year. But I think the top 4 is solidified, and after that, it gets a little cloudy. So I determine this by talent, production, and adversity, which can be like, you're on a bad team, you have tough competition, and things like that. So heading into the 2025-2026 NFL season, I rank Dak as the 7th best quarterback in the NFL, outside of the top 5 and below Matthew Stafford and Jaden Daniels. Matthew Stafford will not hold on to this that much longer, being 37, a laundry list of injuries, but I do believe the experience he has and the talent and results all speak for themselves on that one. He has been great everywhere he's been and is a for sure Hall of Famer in my eyes. Jaden Daniels is certainly a projection on my end, and I could be wrong. Like I said, this is subject to change, but the results on year 1 on a rebuilding Commanders team is hard to argue with. no cakewalk playoff run either, going through the Buccaneers and the Lions, injured as they may have been, playing through rib injuries, and the talent is the main thing for me. That ability that he has to avoid sacks and extend plays for not just a moment, but seconds, opens up an insane amount more opportunity for the offense to make explosive plays and bail themselves out of bad situations, and it just cannot be replaced. Jaden is just beyond Dak, in my opinion, when it comes to that. Throw in the fact that this was just his first year on a worse team, and I feel comfortable with the stance that Jaden will surpass Dak if he hasn't already in the eyes of others. But the guys below him, it gets really tricky, like I said, so let me explain my reasoning. With Jalen Hurts, I have an entire video explaining why I'm low on him. But when it comes down to much of what we've talked about already, he has everything that has killed Dak in the playoffs when he won the Super Bowl and in the years prior. An amazing defense and a run game to soften the effect of his mistakes as a QB. Jalen was responsible for 3,500 yards this year. He would have barely hit 3,000 passing if he played all 17 games. And Saquon alone had 2,283 yards. In 2023, when Dak was last fully healthy, he was responsible for 4,758 yards. And the running backs combined for 1,422 yards. And this same conversation has existed around guys like Purdy and CMC. That's just the surface level of evaluating the dependency or lack thereof in these offenses on their QBs. And believe me, it just goes deeper the more that you look at it. So check out that Hurts video if you want to see more on that. Now, Kyler is one I actually believe is more talented than Dak and dealt with a worse supporting cast, but I've expected more results over the years. And while I don't think he's like a locker room cancer, I'd like to hear more support coming from the team and organization about his leadership and development. Dak has also suffered, like I've stated so far and laid out for you, from his organization as well. Not to the same degree, I would say. I think he's definitely had a better team, but it still holds him back too. And then Stroud is a really tough one. Like I said, subject to change, but I think he plays a lot like Dak and also has an awful offensive line his whole career. I just want to see 1 year of a healthy team and what that looks like with him, but we may not get that for a while. So I'm holding off on projecting him any higher than this for now. As with Jaden Daniels, I think he's got a team that is much more prepared to project. Baker Mayfield, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about. I think Dak is working with a bigger tool belt and they play very similar, so Dak is more capable. I think they both have like that competitive winner's mindset, but I'd say the Bucs offense and coaching has been pretty damn good. So when it comes to that, good on Baker for making the most of it, but I would have expected a win over Washington personally. So that is my ranking of Dak. Plenty of room for discussion about the guys surrounding him. I want to know what you guys think about it. And now I want to close things out by talking about just Dak. I think among all the QB discourse too, it's easy to forget who these players are as well. Between being doubted his whole life, becoming the center of some of the most ridiculous talking points in sports, losing his mother and brother, Dak has overcome such an immense amount in not just football, but in life. These types of people who come out of these situations as successful leaders and with a positive attitude should not be taken for granted. I truly believe that intangible drive, not just to be great, but to be humble in your approach, is the key to unlocking your potential and being the best you can. So like I said about guys like Jalen Hurts, as a person, Dak deserves every bit of praise he gets because he does it the right way. He poses a great role model for young fans of the NFL, and he's a model of success. But I don't believe he's been the reason the team has come out flat in the playoffs. To me, it's more schematically underprepared, and when that's the case, you can feel the energy off the team that they just aren't confident in the plan that they're going to win. And I would certainly credit Dak with being a great person and a great leader. So that's why Dak is the most controversial quarterback in the NFL. The playoff losses convince people that he doesn't have what it takes to go all the way. But that ignores the key facets for a Super Bowl roster that his team lacked. Many have lacked this, and among them, he looks to be one of the best. So there's no reason to believe Dak can't win a Super Bowl on a better team. And now Dak enters another season coming off injury. But historically, he's shown us that he will bounce back. The Cowboys have a brand new coaching staff, invested into the trenches on both sides. Seems like they're finally making an effort to fix those issues, as well as new ones, like lacking an option next to CeeDee Lamb. They just traded for Steelers wide receiver George Pickens, instantly making him and CeeDee a top 3 wide receiver duo in the NFL. This new staff is a mystery box, but this roster finished strong last year without Dak, just got even better, and I've really got a good feeling about this Cowboys team. I don't think they're going anywhere. And if they get to that conference championship, it's going to be the first time Dak's ever been there and ever had a chance to make a Super Bowl. They'll probably be versing the rival Eagles. Maybe the Lions are healthy and dangerous again. Maybe the Commanders continue their rise, or the Rams are giving it one last shot. Whoever it is, it's still going to be a ton of pressure. But I have a feeling we're going to find out. He was ready all along.
I've made a promise that his life will be one taken to save millions. To get help, and it saves lives. I know my mom, it's what she would want.